Hello, I'm Julie Levitt-Learson for Fairfield University, and today we are discussing the role of the audience and what makes good theater. So, to carry on our conversation about audience and actor expectations, I give you this quote from George Bernard Shaw, who was a playwright and theater critic in the late 1800s. I don't know what play he was talking about here, but I assume it was one of his own. He said, "The play was a perfect success. The audience was a dismal failure." What do you think he means by this? He's no doubt being witty, as well as kind of arrogant in his own sense of talent, but he is probably describing a situation where audience expectations and production expectations did not mesh well. So let's unpack some of this a little bit more. What makes, quote, good theater? Our textbook was talking about theater as art versus theater as entertainment. So, where do you come down on it? Is all theater art? Is theater just entertainment? Is there a difference? And if there is, what makes theater one or the other, art or entertainment? Generally speaking, we think of entertainment as an escape from real life and a stress reliever, that something is entertaining when it's relaxing and it doesn't really challenge us. Whereas we think of art with a capital A, maybe it's something that's hard or kind of difficult to access, that it's kind of, highbrow and over our heads. And that may be so. But I'm rather drawn to this pearl of wisdom from Quintus Horatius Flaccus, also known as Horace, who was a Roman poet and playwright. And he wrote right around the turn of the millennia, about 15 BCE. He wrote a piece called Ars Poetica, which was an essay offering advice to other aspiring poets. And he said, our friend Horace, he said that the poet must both delight and instruct, which is rather lovely. Now, I don't think Horace was a particularly stuffy guy, because he also said, "Now is the time to drink and dance footloose upon the earth," in case you thought Kenny Loggins had coined the phrase. But what do you make of this quote that I have here on this slide, that the poet must both delight and instruct? Now, we can broaden that word poet out to mean playwright or just artist in general. But what must art be doing if it's going to both delight and instruct its audience? Some other theater thinkers have had some idea about what makes good theater. Let's start with our friend Aristotle from ancient Athens, about 300 BCE. And what Aristotle thought one needed to have in order for a theatrical production to be a success was that you had to have the audience reach catharsis, which he defined as an emotional cleanse. So catharsis happens when there is an intentional buildup and release of emotional tension in the audience members. And that buildup and then release of tension results in an emotional cleansing. Right? So think about this, like if you're stressed out about something and you have a good cry, or kind of just do a shout out into the void, and after that you feel a little bit better. That's kind of catharsis. That's what Aristotle is going for here, but he wanted the entire audience to have this experience. So as you can imagine, being emotionally invested enough in a play to build up this tension and then release it is going to require a high level of empathy from the audience. They're really going to have to be feeling the stressful feelings that the characters are supposed to be experiencing on the stage. So high empathy, emotional tension being kind of artificially built up and then released at the end. And if this sounds weird to you, we do this in every single action movie out in theaters or on Netflix today, right? You've felt it. You've sat in your seat with, your kind of jaw clenched and your muscles tight, kind of sitting on the edge of your seat and kind of holding your breath a little bit, wondering if, things are going to turn out all right. And then when they do, you might kind of scream and shout or just let your breath out. Also, if you're not even a theater or movie person, but you follow a sports team, you know exactly what catharsis is. It's the Super Bowl, it's the fourth quarter, the game is tied, or you're maybe, 5 points down, and it's the third down. What's going to happen? Nobody breathes. Everybody's tense. You're practically playing the game with those football players. And then they make it, and you scream and shout and throw the nachos in the air and spill the beer and have a wonderful time and hug, and then you sit down and you feel like you played the game yourself. Catharsis. So that was Aristotle's idea of good theater. But then we have Bertolt Brecht, who was a mid 20th century German playwright who emigrated to America to escape World War II. And he did not at all buy into this idea of catharsis. He said, no, no, no. What theater needs to have is a Verfremdungseffekt, which is perhaps my favorite Scrabble word, right? This translates roughly into the alienation effect. So what do we mean by that? Well, it's kind of, you can think of it as making the familiar strange. The alienation effect is this kind of intellectual experience that is a call to social action. And Bertolt Brecht said, I don't want my audience members feeling along with the characters. I don't want them to have this fantastic empathy, because when you're feeling empathy for the characters and the characters are doing something wrong or doing something injudicious or doing something unjust, I don't want the audience to be rooting for those characters. I want the audience to be like, you're making a terrible mistake, or you're doing something terrible, or this needs to be fixed right now. He wanted the audience to be able to sit back and make judgment calls about what was going on. So to do that, you need the absence of empathy and you need greater aesthetic distance. And as you can see here in this photo, which is from a production of a play by Bertolt Brecht called Mother Courage, right? This is a play that is set in during the Hundred Years' War in Germany. And Mother Courage is a woman who kind of follows the army and makes her living off of like unofficially helping out the soldiers. And she's a shrewd businesswoman, and she's ruthless, and she's not a particular good mother, and things happen. And so it can be very easy for us to get very caught up in the story and think, oh, poor Mother Courage, this is so terrible, what's going on? But Bertolt Brecht didn't want us to do that. He wanted us to kind of sit back and be judging what was going on. So you can see here, there's this kind of realistic costume and piece of scenery here, this wagon that she's pulling, but then you can see the bare back wall of the stage, and you can see the stage lights, and you can see this scaffolding that looks not at all like Germany in the 1600s. It looks very much like, oh, we're in a theater, we're doing a play, this isn't real. Bertolt Brecht was very into this idea of reminding us all the time that it wasn't real, that it was a play, that these are actors, all to keep us from developing that empathy connection. So those are two ideas of what makes good theater, but let's look at a third. The 14th century Japanese playwright Zeami, who was considered the kind of master practitioner of No theater, Noh, which was traditional Japanese drama. Zeami believed in this experience called Yugen, which kind of translates as like mystery and depth. And what he means by this is that when you're seeing a work of theater, it's a beauty that can only be partially be perceived in an ephemeral experience. So you're seeing something beautiful, but it's something that's not going to last long, and you're not really seeing the whole of it. So it's kind of like a flower, right? A flower is really beautiful, but the flower blooms and fades and dies very quickly, and you kind of never see all of that at once. You're only seeing part of that flower's existence and can never really encompass the whole thing at once. So Japanese No theater doesn't have a really racy plot that's action-packed like what we in America in the 21st century are used to. And it didn't bring audience members on this emotional journey of catharsis where they built up tension and then released it. And Japanese theater in the 14th century did not force us to remember that we were watching a play so that we could sit back in judgment on the actions of the characters. Instead, no theater was drawing on Japanese, you know, old stories and folk tales that audiences would have been very familiar with the stories, and was kind of involved in like ritual beauty and symbolism. There was chanting, there are kind of very carefully choreographed dance moves, costumes that are filled with very specific symbolic meaning, so that it was almost kind of the way like certain religious rites are acted out, although this wasn't a religion, right? This is entertainment. um, but that all of this ritual beauty and symbolism was designed to encourage the audience to kind of think deeply and self-reflect on these kind of unknowable mysteries that are unfolding about us all the time. And so that the theater goers are going to experience this kind of fleeting ephemeral pleasure, like a soap bubble, of this performance that is lovely and entertaining and beautiful to watch. But they're going to be contemplating the ideas that were brought up in this play, and the meaning of it and the resonance of it all long after the performance ends. So, this is more like kind of a spiritual transcendence moment to really just kind of stop and be still and try to think deeply. So, three different types of theater, three different types of desired audience responses. Catharsis, which is a very emotional or almost physical uh, journey that involves emotional cleansing. The referendums effect, that is an intellectual distance method where we can then be spurred to social action after witnessing kind of problematic behaviors on the stage. Or Jürgen, which is this quiet spiritual contemplation of the deep mystery. Any or all of those sound good to me. I'm hoping they sound good to you too. So for me, I guess I'm kind of a student of Horace. I think that good theater should challenge its audience while still allowing the audience to enjoy themselves. And I think that's a fine balance, because if you challenge your audience too much, they're going to start to tune you out. But if you're going to produce theater that just panders to its audience and doesn't really ask anything of them, then you're not really making anything worthwhile. So, turning to that article, The Scourge of Relatability, that I asked you to read, um, let's try to unpack a little bit about what's going on with that word, because relatability, I'm going to be honest, is one of my least favorite words. If empathy is all about thinking and feeling yourself into the character situation, that's requiring an audience to be an active participant in the drama, right? You're not up on stage doing the actions, but you're feeling as if you were. But if we're relying on plays to be relatable, relatability demands that the characters become like us. Instead of us looking at the characters and going, oh, I can see how they're feeling, I can feel what they're feeling. Relatability is asking, like, I can't feel what they're feeling unless they know how I'm feeling, right? So we become very passive, and that makes us miss out on being part of the drama on stage. So relatability is fine in that you don't want theater that is so nonsensical that you can't understand what's going on. And you don't want characters that are so alien to yourself that you cannot find any connection between yourself and them. But my point is that you need to be looking to find those connections, not letting the characters on the stage make those connections and come to you. Audience members have to be active participants in a work of theater. But having said all that, I am going to say representation matters. I have here two images, one of a kid posing like Black Panther and one of a little girl looking up at a poster of Wonder Woman. And yeah, I think it's really important that we have theater that we can relate to. I'm going to leave you with one more quotation from another 19th century playwright. This is Oscar Wilde, who in 1892, on the opening night of his play Lady Windermere's Fan, said this at the curtain: Ladies and gentlemen, I have enjoyed this evening immensely. The actors have given us a charming rendering of a delightful play, and your appreciation has been most intelligent. I congratulate you on the great success of your performance, which persuades me that you think almost as highly of the play as I do.